Hello, thank you for coming today. This morning, House Judiciary heard House Bill 718, a bill that would have provided a mechanism for family and law enforcement to step in and save their loved ones if they believe they were a danger to themselves or others. We all know that Montana has the highest suicide rate in the nation, and a red flag laws are evidence-based intervention tool that saves lives. We're very disappointed. They have already voted today, and they voted on party lines 11-8. We really feel like saving people's lives shouldn't be a party decision. And I'm going to turn over the time to HB 718's sponsor, Representative Ferris Olsen.
First of all, thank you to you all. This really is their bill. I'm just the carrier. And I was proud to carry it because we do have a suicide crisis, and that suicide crisis generally involves firearms in Montana. It's the most successful method of suicide, and we've heard this over and over in judiciary. We've heard, I think, 5 or 6 bills about gun safety and trying to create education or laws that limit access to those firearms for young people. And we haven't acted on any of those bills. And again, judiciary today failed to act on those bills. We know there's a crisis, and we've done nothing. So I'm hopeful that some of the discussions today and in the past will lead us down a path where we can openly talk about the risks that firearms pose when it's clear that someone is a danger to themselves or to someone else. We know these programs work. We know they've worked in Connecticut. They saw a 7.5% at a minimum decrease in firearm suicides. We know it's worked in Indiana. 13 other states, if you include Colorado, have these types of laws. There's no reason Montana shouldn't. We know they work, and I'm hopeful that the next session we can bring a bill that will solve this problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Ferris Olsen. Now we'll hear from Representative Keogh.
Hello, everybody. I'm Connie Keogh, and I represent House District 91 from Missoula. That's the Rattlesnake and through downtown. This is my first time serving, and I'm learning so much here in the legislature. And what I know is we couldn't do anything here without support from great groups like Moms Demand Action. And I appreciate everything you've done with Representative Ferris Olsen on House Bill 718. You know, I'm also on the Judiciary Committee, both Representative Ferris Olsen and myself. And you know, we had a good hearing today. There wasn't a lot of time for people to tell their personal stories, so that was a little bit disappointing, but you need to know, there were no opponents at the hearing. It was all proponents, and just thank you for everyone coming. Sadly, I have a personal story that House Bill 718 could have made a difference. You know, the bottom line is there are these tragic acts of gun violence happening in all of our families, myself included. And we had red flags. We knew that there was an issue, and my family took some steps to protect ourselves, and we were very worried. This kind of a bill would have helped us and local law enforcement to, you know, see these warning signs and to seek an extreme risk protective order. There's a lot of noise here in the background. A court order that temporarily would have been able to remove guns from this person in crisis. I really believe that this legislation is important, and that we should continue to work in the state on future years to have this happen so that families like mine don't end in tragedy. And in my situation, it was a suicide, and I'm hopeful that we can stop that trend in the future with this type of legislation. Again, thank you. I just hear all the noise behind.
Thank you, Representative Keogh. We'll now hear from Zoe Bernhard with the Addictive and Mental Disorders Division of the Department of Health and Human Services. Thanks for being here, Zoe.
Hi, I'm going to speak to some of the data and the facts associated with red flag bills. First of all, as the sponsor noted, we hold the dubious distinction in Montana of being #1 in the nation with regard to suicide. In studies of red flag bills, there were all kinds of reasons that firearms were temporarily removed, including anger and conflict between intimate partners, emotional distress from financial problems, and grief and loss. But the #1 reason that weapons were temporarily removed was the risk of suicide. This is a good bill from a policy perspective. It's supported by the department and the governor's office. It is a bill that's based on solid policy and policy research. This bill, a bill that looks like this, has successfully reduced suicide by firearm in both Indiana and Connecticut. The bill is based on checks and balances. It institutes temporary gun removal in order to save lives. And an important thing that this bill had in it was the ability for friends and family to petition the court. And this is really key because friends and family are the people who are most likely to see signs of concern and be able to help out their relatives. Suicide by firearm is the most common kind of suicide in Montana. The U.S. percentage of suicide by firearm is 51%. In Montana, it is 63%. And in Montana, 88% of all firearm deaths are suicides. Study after study have shown that lethal means restriction is a proven effective means of suicide prevention. It's unfortunate that this bill has been tabled, but it is a good bill, and I'm glad to be here today to support it on behalf of the department.
Thank you, Zoe. It's getting really loud in here. Now, I'm going to turn over the time to Kathy Shea, a licensed clinical social worker in Helena.
Hi, my name is Kathy Kinsella Shea, and I'm a child and family therapist who specializes in the treatment of trauma, bereavement, and suicide prevention. I was asked to be here today to speak in favor of the red flag law in House Bill 718, and unfortunately my agenda's changed because it was voted down this morning. So I'm going to stand here today, and people can be hopeful later. But right now, I'm angry. And I'm going to own being angry because I work in this field every single day with people who are struggling with bipolar disorder, depression, anxiety, and suicidal tendencies. And every day, I worry about losing my patients. This is a sound bill. It was a sound bill. It remains a sound bill. And hopefully in some form this can resurrect in the future. But I want to still speak about why it's so important. I find any discussion about gun legislation seems to disintegrate into a black and white, either or kind of approach, as if the issues of public safety and Second Amendment rights are mutually exclusive, and never the twain shall meet. It's confusing to me. I'm here today to suggest that we begin to approach the issue of the new red flag law from where I spend most of my days as a therapist, in the gray areas of life, in the world of both and. Both that we need civil liberties that are supported by due process, that are methodical and consistent and rigorous, and that we recognize that sometimes in the middle of a mental illness, our brains work against us, and we become a threat to ourselves, and we rely on other people in our lives that support us to make sure and ensure our safety until we can ensure our own safety in the future. Both that Second Amendment rights for our citizens are inherent to our Constitution, and when confronting the very real threat of a person with homicidal tendencies, that person has no business having a gun. No single constitutional right should ever be more sacred than human life. I do realize that gun ownership is grounded in the lives of ourselves as Montanans as solidly as the mountains that surround us, and they define us as citizens of Montana. But we are also, as Montanans, grounded in common sense values, and isn't it time to stop the partisan rhetoric and bring common sense back into the dialogue about community safety? So let's talk about the difference between rhetoric and reality. We can talk about the reality of that time when a domestic violence incident with a gun spilled over onto my sister's Arizona middle school campus. And I watched with hopeless horror and helplessness on the news as they broadcast an aerial view of her school campus with a SWAT team, rifles drawn, moving building to building. And I knew she was protecting her students, but I did not know in the weeks after the Newtown tragedy if she would come out alive. Recent studies have shown, and I'm going to repeat these statistics until we are blue in the face so that you hear them. Recent studies have shown that in an analysis of mass shootings from 2009 to 2017, in 51% of those incidents, the shooter exhibited warning signs before they posed a danger to themselves or others before the shooting. Red flag laws can save lives by creating a way for family members and law enforcement to act before the warning signs escalate into a tragedy. Red flag laws allow citizens to petition the courts for an extreme risk protection order that would temporarily, let's repeat that, temporarily take away someone's possession of firearms or right to purchase firearms until the danger has passed. 13 other states and the District of Columbia have passed these laws. They are common sense, and I hoped that Montana would be next, and I'll keep that hope alive. We can also talk about the searing reality of my being a crisis responder in our local community high school following the suicide death of a beautiful young person by gun. Not once and not twice, but 6 separate times in a row. I struggled to provide comfort as devastated students and staff wrestled with the ultimate question we all ask after a loss, which is why? And the answer as to why was so complicated that not a single factor would suffice to ease their very real pain. So here's an answer to that question. Montana, and I'm going to repeat this as others have, is number 1 in suicide completions in the nation. It is not something we as Montanans should be proud of. It should be something we fight every day to make sure that that statistic changes. But we have remained in the top 3 spots of suicide completion for the 40 years that this research has been done. On average, 1 Montana resident dies by firearm suicide every 52 hours. If we had more time, we could debate as to why this is. Is it the altitude? Is it a cowboy up mentality? Is it quick access to firearms? Is it a lack of healthcare resources? Or is it some other intangible factor we don't know yet? Or is it all of those things? Although those reasons are numerous, the fact of the matter is this. Nearly 2/3 of all gun deaths in the U.S. are suicides. Guns are by the very definition lethal means. 85% of those who utilize a gun in a suicide attempt will die. I want you to then consider and compare that to the 5% of deaths following suicide attempts utilizing alternate means that are not gun. Professionals can treat mental illness. I can treat that. I know what to do. We know what to do. There are evidence-based practices that we use every day, but we have to have the time to do it. And these laws, these red flag laws, do exactly that. They buy healthcare providers time to save a life. We know that oftentimes the time frame between when someone makes a plan and when they attempt can be as short as 15 minutes. So what do red flags do? Red flag laws do. They prevent access to lethal means in that short time frame, and they could save a life. They allow us as treatment providers the precious time necessary to combat the symptoms of mental illness in an environment free from ready access to the single most lethal of means. It is past time to take action. In its roots, the recommendations from survivors, from medical providers, and from law enforcement. But let's not listen to those folks, right? Okay, we need to stop being reactionary. We need to look at the statistics. We need to take in the evidence, and we need to do something. And it's my hope that we'll listen to reason in the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kathy. Finally, we're going to hear from Mayor Wilmot Collins about why passing HB 718 would be so important in Montana.
I came here today to support this bill, not only because I know it's sensible, but I had a 10 o'clock meeting this morning from a veteran organization. And one of the veterans saw my pin. And he said, "Mayor, why are you wearing the pin?" I said, I lost a buddy of mine to a bullet. And this is in his memory and all others. And he said, "Did he eat his bullet?" I said, "Yes, he ate the bullet." He said, "I lost a buddy like that." And I said, "Well, mine happened a while ago." He said, "When?" I said, 2004. He said, 2004? And I said, whoa, stop. Tell me how your buddy did it. And as he started saying it, we realized we were talking about the same person. He was in Afghanistan. I was at Fort Carson taking care of casualties. And we had the same buddy. He's wearing his as a tattoo on his arm. This should not be a partisan issue. Veterans are dying. And in fact, this is what he sent me. He left with me. He said, "Mayor, you see the 22 there? There are 22 of our brothers and sisters that are dying every day to bullets, to suicide. Those people that are dying, they're Republicans, they're Democrats, they're Independents, the Green Party, they're everything. This should not be a partisan issue. Why is it? Believe me, I'm angry just like you, because this bill is reasonable. And when our veterans are dying and we're looking at different political parties, this is a no-go for me. This is a no-go for all these women back here. It's time we stop the partisan bickering and look out for each other. It's sad that this bill died today, but you know what? This veteran group came up to me and said, "Mayor, we're looking for ways to save our brothers and sisters. And we're having a fundraiser to help those families that keep going through this. Please attend." That's why they went to me, and little did I know I was going to be meeting a friend for life who went through the identical same thing as I did. A friend to suicide. A veteran to suicide. Ladies and gentlemen, this is long overdue. It's time we come together and make this a reality. I really, in fact, I don't appreciate you anymore. I love you guys. No, this is real. I love you for what you're doing, because everything you're doing is sensible. It's blind to politics. It's not political at all. It's trying to save our loved ones. What's wrong with saving our loved ones? Someone, please tell me. Absolutely nothing. But you know what? Let's keep the fire alive. This will come true. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mayor Collins, for being here. I'm going to end by reading a survivor story from one of our own Moms members from Billings, Montana. 42 years ago, I was 7 years old. I had been told to rearrange my room and make space for Grandma. She was going to come live with us. I was beyond excited. I didn't know why Grandma was coming, and I didn't care. I loved my grandmother. As I was rearranging my belongings, the phone rang. My father took the call, hung up, and started crying. I had never seen my strong daddy cry before. He told me Grandma was not coming after all because Grandma had gone to heaven instead. Of course, 7-year-old me was confused. When I got older, I found out that Grandma had been making plans to come live with us to escape her abusive spouse. When she told him she was leaving, he got the rifle and chased her out into the alfalfa field, shot her 3 times, and then turned the gun on himself. Fast forward 40 years. Tommy was my best friend. He was the ultimate outdoorsman. He loved to hunt and plink and had quite the collection of firearms. When Tommy turned 35, he started to exhibit some signs of mental illness. He also became abusive towards his spouse. We begged him to get help, but he couldn't. He was clouded by his illness. He didn't see a problem. His wife decided to leave him. As she got into the car to drive off, he jumped into the passenger seat with one of his handguns. We will never know what was said between the two of them. We just know he murdered her and then put the gun to his own head. They were found hours later. When a family member got worried, the wife had not shown up to their house as they had planned. These are just 2 incidents in just this one mom's life. These are the reasons that we all get involved in this organization, because we're here to save lives. And we're not going to give up. This was just our start. This was our beginning, and we will see through it to make sure that these gun safety laws get passed. Thank you for being here today.